On the quiet, twisting lanes of Hampshire, England, there is a path where the past is never truly silent. The locals call it Ellingham Drove. For generations, they have whispered of a sound that cuts through the night, the unmistakable rumble of a heavy carriage and the thunder of a team of horses at full gallop. But when you look, there's nothing there. No coach, no driver, and no living horses. Just the echoes of a tragedy so profound, it has been playing out in the darkness for over 300 years. This is a story about a place haunted by an historical injustice, a story of a woman whose final journey became a terrifying endless loop. This is the tale of Lady Alice Lisle and the phantom coach with headless horses, coming up on this episode of The Weekly Strange. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Weekly Strange. I am your host, John F. Mers, author, actor, adventurer. So as I am working on one of my most recent novels, I came across this story. Thought it would be interesting to share with you all as we are in the final heydays of summer and speeding toward a spooky autumn season, which I always happen to love, but that's just me. So I figured we would bring you the tale of Lady Alice Lisle today. Now, to understand the ghost of Lady Alice Lisle, we have to journey back to a time of immense political and religious tension in England. The year is 1685. The king, Charles II, has died, and his brother, a devout Catholic, has ascended to the throne as King James II. For many Protestants in England, this was an unacceptable turn of events. Their hopes lay with a different man, James Scott, the handsome and charismatic Duke of Monmouth, the illegitimate but beloved son of the late King Charles II. On June 11th, 1685, Monmouth landed in England and declared himself the rightful king. That simple action ignited a rebellion. His cause, however, was ill-fated from the start. His army was a ragtag collection of farmers, laborers, and nonconformist Protestants who were, let's just say, woefully unprepared for the might of the king's professional forces. The rebellion reached its bloody climax on July 6, 1685, at the Battle of Sedgemoor, the final and decisive land battle fought on English soil. The rebel army was, to put it mildly, decimated. Over 1,000 men were killed, and hundreds more were captured. Monmouth himself escaped the battlefield, but was soon found hiding in a ditch and was executed exactly 9 days later. What followed the rebellion was a period of extreme royal vengeance known as the Bloody Assizes. To crush any remaining dissent, King James II dispatched his Lord Chief Justice, a man of terrifying cruelty and a volatile temper named George Jeffreys. Now, he sent him to the west of England with very simple orders: show no mercy. He was a force of pure intimidation, a legal monster who used bullying, threats, and fear to secure convictions. The scene of the trials was a circus of horror where prisoners were convicted by the hundreds and sentenced to death or to be sold into slavery in the West Indies. And those who were sold into slavery faced no less harsh conditions than if they had been executed. The temperatures were brutal. The labor that they were forced to endure was savage, to say the least. It was into this chaos that Lady Alice Lisle was tragically drawn. She was a woman of wealth and standing, but more importantly, she was known for her deep religious piety and her compassionate nature. Born in 1617, she was a respected gentlewoman in her 60s, living a quiet life at her home, Moyles Court in Ellingham. Her husband, John Lisle, had been a lawyer and parliamentarian who sat on the commission that tried King Charles I, an association that would be used against her to the extreme in her trial. But Alice herself was not a political firebrand. Her character was defined by kindness. Two men, a minister named John Hicks and a lawyer named Richard Nelthorpe, who had fled the bloodshed of Sedgemoor, arrived at her door unexpectedly. They were exhausted, terrified, and seeking a place to hide. Lady Lisle, true to her compassionate nature, gave them shelter for one night. She may have known that Hicks was a fugitive for his religious dissent, but she had no idea of his connection to the rebellion. And as she would later testify to, she believed she was performing an act of charity, not treason. However, her trial in Winchester was a travesty of justice. Judge Jeffreys, seeing an opportunity to make a high-profile example, presided over the court with a furious malice. He bullied witnesses, and most famously, he repeatedly threatened the jury. 3 times the jury returned a verdict of not guilty, convinced that Lady Lisle had not known the men were rebels. 3 times, Judge Jeffreys refused to accept their verdict. With each refusal, his temper grew even more furious, until the jurors, fearing for their own lives under his ferocious glare, finally and reluctantly changed their verdict to guilty. The jury's decision shocked the nation. The sentence for her quote-unquote treason was to be burned at the stake, a brutal and humiliating death typically reserved for common women. The public outcry was so immense that King James II, to save some degree of face, commuted her sentence to beheading. Though a horrific death, it was seen as a mercy, as it was considered a more dignified end for a person, especially a woman, of noble rank. And in retrospect, I suppose it was. After all, beheading is supposed to be fairly instantaneous, whereas being burned at the stake would be pretty awful stuff. The final day of her execution was set on September 2nd, 1685. Lady Alice Lisle was taken to the Eclipse Inn, where she spent her last night. Reportedly, she spent the last night in quiet contemplation, but all around her were the ominous sounds of a scaffold being built directly outside of her window. This was where the beheading was to take place. The next morning, she stepped from a first-floor window onto the scaffold and was publicly executed. She was the first, but not the last, victim of the Bloody Assizes, and her death became a powerful symbol of the king's unrelenting cruelty. After her execution, her body was transported back to Ellingham for burial. It was followed along by a long train of protesters who were grieving silently. And it was this final journey that gave birth to her legend. Locals began to report seeing a phantom coach pulled by headless horses traveling the lonely path of Ellingham Drove. The macabre detail of the headless horses is, of course, a direct and chilling echo of her beheading. But the ghost of Lady Alice Lisle is not confined to this single haunting. Moyles Court, her former home, now a school, is also said to be haunted by her ghost. She is seen as a gray lady, and students and staff have reported hearing the sound of a silk dress rustling and the faint tapping of her heels as she walks the corridors of her former home. Another location where she is said to haunt, the Eclipse Inn, the very inn where she spent her last hours, is also believed to be haunted by her restless spirit. Staff and visitors have reported seeing the ghostly apparition of a tall woman in a gray dress, as well as hearing the sounds of something hastily being built, a sound eerily similar to the scaffold being constructed for her execution. The sightings and sounds are a constant, tragic reminder of her story, a timeless loop of sorrow and injustice playing out across the very places she once lived and eventually died. Now, the legend of a phantom coach is not unique to Lady Alice Lisle. In fact, It's a powerful recurring motif in English folklore, often tied to a tragic figure or an historical injustice. The ghost of Anne Boleyn, for example, is said to ride in a coach holding her head in her lap, while her father, Sir Thomas Boleyn, is said to be cursed to ride in a coach over 12 bridges on the anniversary of her death. And then there's Lady Jane Grey's ghost, which is also said to ride in a phantom coach on New Year's Eve. These stories all share a common theme, a brutal, unjust death that has trapped a soul in a never-ending journey, not free to move on, but forced to stay in the place where they met their tragic end. But why has the legend of Lady Alice Lisle endured for over 300 years? Well, because her story is a deeply human one. It's not just about a ghost. It's about the fragility of justice, the cruelty of power, and the profound tragedy of a person punished for an act of simple kindness. The haunting of Ellingham Drove and Moyles Court serves as a local monument to her memory, a constant reminder of what happened there in the tumultuous summer of 1685. And for those who have heard the Phantom Coach, the experience is not one of a simple jump scare. It's a spine-chilling moment where the veil between past and present thins, and you are confronted with a sound that should not exist. It's a moment of historical terror brought into your world, making a 3-century-old injustice feel chillingly real, especially in the current political upheaval of our present time. The ghost of Lady Alice Lisle is a silent sentinel, if you will, a tragic symbol that rides the night as a warning from a forgotten past about what happens when people forsake kindness for power. Her story, etched into the very roads and buildings of Ellingham and Winchester, proves that some histories refuse to be forgotten. The Phantom Coach, with its headless horses, is more than just a ghost story. It's a living piece of history, an echo of a life unjustly taken, forever seeking a final resting place. Now, what about you? Do you believe that the sound of a carriage can be a ghost? What do you think about the enduring power of a story like this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below this video. Okay, that's going to do it for this episode of The Weekly Strange. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my new uploads. If you really like the content that I'm posting, please consider joining the channel as a member. You get some pretty cool perks, and there's going to be some members-only stuff that's going to be coming out in the next few months. Also, I am super close, even more close than I was the other day, to reaching 1,000 subscribers. So if you know anyone who digs this sort of content, please tell them to come on out and check it out and hopefully subscribe. The more the merrier. And I'm going to be putting out some content on this channel very soon related to my writing work. I talked about this the other day. I'm still trying to figure out how to not confuse the YouTube algorithm. But I will let you know when that is going to be coming out. A lot of it's going to be kind of cool book trailers that are sort of movie-like. We filmed some pretty cool stuff. So I'm going to have that all for you. And then just some behind-the-scenes type stuff on how I write all the books, the projects, the screenplays that I'm involved with, and a bunch more stuff besides that. We're going to be launching a field research series of videos. I've got some pretty exciting stuff that's going to be coming out in the next few months, so please be sure to stay tuned for that. For now, thank you so much for watching and listening. I will see you next week for another episode of The Weekly Strange. In the meantime, keep your ears peeled for any headless horses pulling a phantom coach. Good night.